I had a message come through on Instagram the other day. The message says, as a pro fighter, what is your take on brain damage and other permanent damages that come with combat sports? And I just messaged the guy back and said, you know what, this is an in-depth topic, and me just typing back a couple lines is not going to be enough. I actually have to make a video on this. So that is what we're going to talk about today. Now, the first thing I want to tell you about this episode is I do not want to think on it too much. I don't want to have everything planned out. So I'm going to kind of just do this spontaneous style, which means there'll be a little bit more pauses and maybe a couple little occasional errors. But as opposed to, putting it all together, formatting it, editing it, I just want to give you my real thoughts on it. So obviously, I am super aware of brain damage, head impact when it comes to combat sports. In terms of other damage to the body, I recognize that that is a reality and it's pretty much unavoidable. But in terms of permanent damage, I think everything can be avoided. You are going to have damage, no doubt. But permanent damage, no. I think if you're going about things correctly, you can avoid it. But in particular, I want to start off and I want to talk about the damage to the brain. Because once you start getting impact up there, reversing it is apparently more difficult than reversing something like, a broken finger or a really damaged hip or something like that. Now, my brother actually did a whole assistant. He was an assistant in a study on concussions. And what they were looking at in particular, we actually did the video on it, talking about it a little bit more in depth. You can check that out up there. But what they were basically looking at was the balance between people who take impact to the head in sports and people who do not. Now, I was involved in this study. I actually went in as a participant, and apparently concussion and balance are linked, or at least they believe they're linked. So testing between athletes who take impact to the head and ones that don't, they're looking for some sort of commonality, I suppose. The interesting thing to them, but not so much to me, was I scored the best on the balance. Even though I'm out of all the participants, I'm probably the one who gets hit in the head the most. Now, they might go and say, okay, there's no correlation between balance and concussions because, Gabriel's been hit a lot, but he has the best balance. And I go, well, no, not necessarily in my opinion, because I am probably the athlete out of everybody who came in who works on his balance the most. So maybe my balance would even be better. Or maybe it's just saying that the head impact that I've taken so far has not been enough to impair it because the amount of concussions I've taken, serious ones, have been zero. I've had a few minor ones. Where after I had one time where I vomited and then one time where I got knocked down, but no residual effects after the fact. No headaches, no blurred vision, no issues with light. Like when you start getting severe concussion symptoms, light even bothers you, apparently. You have to stay in dark places. That sounds completely awful. So in this study, with me having the best balance, but being the person who probably got hit the most, I went, okay, maybe the study was not done the way it should have been done, or maybe this is just a very hard area to study. And I think that is the case. Concussions are very hard to study. But with all of that said, basically, I want to just say that yes, I am very aware of concussions and the damage. So you might ask, okay, Gabriel, what are you doing about that then? How are you avoiding long-term damage? And that is the question. That is a great question. How do you go about making sure that when you finish your fight career, or even 20 years as just somebody who does this recreationally, you don't leave with long-term damage or any damage to your brain, really. And that is all going to come down to how you train. I truly believe the training is going to be the issue. Yes, the fighting is damaging. Yes, if you go in and you get rattled, that's not great. But if we think of how many times I've fought, let's say for me, decent amount, 45 times, or 46 or 47. I've actually lost track now. I just know it's 45 plus. So if we look at somebody like me, we've had 45 fights. Those range between 1 round and 5 rounds for each fight, depending on whether I scored a knockout, whether it was a title fight. I've had a lot of title fights that went the whole distance, so a lot of them are going to be more like 5 rounds. But overall, a decent number of rounds, but nothing close to what I used to do when I was sparring 12 rounds 3 times a week. I mean, I was just putting in so many sparring rounds and going way too hard. So now what I do is I knock down the number of sparring rounds. I don't spar in between fight camps unless it's just super duper light. We're talking legitimately just a playtime tag, like the way you would spar with like a 6-year-old when you don't want to hurt them. And then also, in addition to that, I've just removed the sparring where you're trying to kill one another pretty much as often as I can. Occasionally you get in against somebody who's really trying to rip your head off, and you have 2 options. Number 1, you got to fight back, or number 2, you just say, whoa, chill out, man. So taking away the ego is going to be a massive part of keeping your brain safe long term. And I'm lucky I've had very good defense for a long time. So me being able to block shots, avoid shots has helped me out a lot. But make no mistake, I am very aware of the repercussions of taking too many shots to the head, and then my fight career finishes and I have a whole bunch of life left, hopefully. And in that time, I'm not functioning the way I want to because I've taken too much head impact. I do not want that to happen. And I'm being very, very particular now about knocking down the number of rounds I do, taking break in between fight camp, recovering fully, and making sure the rounds are not crazy hard. If you are doing all 3 of those things, you're sparring all year round, you're doing fast, hard rounds, and a whole lot of rounds, it's not going to be good. And there's a chance that you are going to get concussed too many times. And when you get older, you're going to be feeling those effects. We just don't want that. So be aware and start making adjustments right now. If you're watching this video, it's okay to tell people, you know what, I don't want to spar 80, 90, 100%. Why can't we just do 50 and work on timing? And like I said, you just have to put ego aside, because somebody might look at you and be like, whoa, this guy's being a little baby. And you just go, I don't care. I just want to be healthy. So that's sort of my take on brain damage. In terms of recovering from concussions, if you've had one or if you're trying to go about doing that, that's sort of an area where you want to find a specialist. Not necessarily somebody who's like an MD, doctor, just your family doctor. You want to go and find somebody who actually specializes in concussion recovery, who can take you through the stages of rehabilitating, getting back to training, because you definitely don't want to get concussed and then go back into hard activity, because you're just aggravating everything. You want to start slow and work your way up. And I've never had to go through this process because I've never had the serious concussions, but I know people who have, and I know the baby steps that you take, starting off and going for a walk. Okay, you feel okay after a week? Okay, we'll turn that into a light jog. Okay, then we'll try some weights. And, it takes a month. A month recovery is what was suggested and the whole program laid out. So if you want to have the correct stages for concussion recovery, find somebody who's an expert, and even they are still doing a lot of research and a lot of studies to learn more about this, because not everything is known yet. Actually, as far as I understand, very little is known about concussions and just all the symptoms and the recovery and just the way it affects you, everything. Still a lot of work to be done. Now let's move on and let's talk about long-term permanent damage to the body. And what I've learned, because I know, I've taken a number of pretty bad injuries throughout the years, which could easily turn into something long-term if I do not treat them and take the downtime. And I started to recognize this when I had a back injury that I did not, pay any attention to. I just kept training, hurt more, kept training, thought it would go away. I was young, 20, 21 years old, just figured, I'll bounce back. And I got to the point where I couldn't lean forward and splash water on my face when I went to the sink. And I realized very quickly, okay, I have to take the time to recover. And unfortunately for me, because I pushed my body, it wasn't like in one day I just went crash. It's like weeks and weeks of going down and down and down and down until I hit the breaking point. Well, you're not going to jump back, boom, in a day or two. Takes just as long, if not longer, to do the proper recovery. So if you damage yourself slowly but surely over a week, you might need a week or 2 weeks off. I probably slowly damaged myself for a month, maybe even longer, and it took me 3 or 4 months to recover. So what I've learned since that experience is when I do have an injury, I keep training, but I do not utilize the injured limb or body part. And let's say, for example, I hurt my knee very badly and I can't utilize it for running, kicking, maybe even standing on. but I can go to the pool and swim laps just with my upper body. Or I can go to the gym, sit down on a upper body recumbent bike. So it's kind of like a speed bag, but you grab two handles and just pump like that. And I'll do that nonstop for a week until the knee starts to feel better, and then I'll slowly incorporate exercises with my lower body. Anyway, the point being, taking the time to recover properly, rehabilitate, and not rush getting back in, I believe will stop the permanent injuries. Even if you have something crazy bad, like I've had times where I woke up in bed and I couldn't lift my head up. My head was stuck because my neck was so locked, and I had to get my wife, or she was my girlfriend at the time, Rachel, to help push me off the bed so I could get into a seated position so I could go and see a specialist because my head just was not working. That seems like it's something that you'd go, ooh, shoot, that's going to permanently affect you down the road. But now, got a couple cracks when I did that, but overall my neck is feeling great. I have not had neck pain in 2 or 3 years whatsoever. And it's just because I've taken the time, I keep up with the exercises, and I don't rush recovery. Slow going. So I do truly believe that any permanent damage to the body, if you take the time, will not be permanent. And you can bounce back from it, unless you're foolish and you don't listen to yourself. You listen to your body, you know what's up. Head impact, if you're careful and you're not going and getting concussed a couple times per year and you're not fighting like a fool, then yes, I believe you can get out of this career and be very healthy, both physically and mentally. So those are my thoughts on this great question that came through on Instagram. I get so many questions now between Facebook, email, Instagram, YouTube comments, and very often I don't get to people's requests for a couple months. But this one came through a few days ago and I just went, you know what? This is beneficial for everybody on the channel. I should answer this as quick as possible. If you guys have your own requests, but you're kind of going, Gabriel probably doesn't get around to, reading everything, and it is difficult, I'm not going to lie, but I really try and make an effort to get back to people, to answer their questions, and if I can't answer them in a couple seconds, boom, 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 answered, then I'll try and make a video on them. So don't be shy. Feel free to reach out. Let me know what your concerns are, your questions, your queries, and I will try and get back to them. I hope you guys enjoyed this video on just staying healthy and being able to do the sport we love without fear of suffering for it down the road. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like. If you have not already, join the channel, get subscribed. As always, guys, train hard, stay safe, and I will see you back here soon for another episode.